Contents. Page I. Introduction 7-2. Putnam's Sons, New York, as a full history of Woodstock, has been in preparation for several years, and will, it is hoped, be published in the course of another year. This brief sketch is issued as it was read at the bicentennial anniversary of St. Ives. Town. Woodstock, an historical sketch by Clarence Bowen, Ph.D., read at Roseland Park, Woodstock, Connecticut, at the bicentennial celebration of the town, on Tuesday, September 7th, 1886, New York, London, G. Knickerbocker Press, 1886. Copyright by Clarence Winthrop Bowen, 1886, Press of G.P. The settlement of Massachusetts Bay and of Roxbury, 8th the 3rd. The Nipmuc country and the visit of John Eliot to the Indians at Wabbaquasset, or Woodstock, 12 the 4th. The settlement of New Roxbury, or Woodstock, 25th. The change of the name of New Roxbury to Woodstock, 28th the 6th. Ecclesiastical Affairs, 3068. The growth of the new township, 1691, 1731-32, Dublin. The transfer of Woodstock from Massachusetts to Connecticut, 43 tithe. Conclusion, 61. Index 63. I. Characteristics of Woodstock, 58 to 3rd in Potter. Military record, 46X. Educational matters, 53 checks. Volvo. Distinguished citizens, 55 toes. The history of the town of Woodstock is associated with the beginnings of history in New England. The planting of these colonies was one of the fruits of the Reformation. The ideas of the first settlers of Woodstock were the ideas of the first settlers of the colony of Plymouth and the province of Massachusetts Bay. The antagonism between the established Church of England and the nonconformists led to the settlement of New England. The Puritans of Massachusetts, at first nonconformists, became separatists like the Pilgrims of Plymouth. Pilgrims and Puritans alike accepted persecution and surrendered the comforts of home to obtain religious liberty. They found it in New England, and here, more quickly than in the mother country, they developed also the civil liberty which is now the birthright of every Anglo-Saxon. In Colonshire, fell into discourse about New England and the planting of the gospel there. The settlement of Woodstock is intimately connected with the first organized settlement on Massachusetts Bay, and how our mother town of Roxbury was first established is best told in the words of Thomas Dudley in his letter to the Countess of Lincoln, under date of Boston, March 12, 1631. About the year 1627, some friends, being together in L. In 1629, we sent divers ships over with about 300 people. In 1628, we procured a patent from His Majesty for our planting between the Massachusetts Bay and Charles River on the south and the River of Merrimack on the north, and 3 miles on either side of those rivers and bay. And the same year we sent Mr. John Endicott and some with him to begin a plantation. Mr. Winthrop of Suffolk, who was well known in his own country and well approved here for his piety, liberality, wisdom, and gravity, coming in to us, we came to the resolution that in April 1630 we were forced to change council, and for our present shelter to plant dispersedly. Settlements were accordingly made at Salem, Charlestown, Boston, Medford, Watertown, and in several other localities. The 6th settlement was made, to quote further from the same letter to the Countess of Lincoln, by others of us 2 miles from Boston, in a place we named Roxbury, 1. The date of settlement was September 28, 1630, and just 3 weeks later the first general court that ever sat in America was held in Boston. The same year the first church in Boston was organized. Roxbury, like the other settlements of Massachusetts Bay, was a little republic in itself. Church and state were inseparable. The government of Roxbury, like the other plantations, was founded on a theocratic basis. The people chose the selectmen and governed themselves. And as early as 1634, like the 7 other organized towns, they sent 3 deputies to Boston to attend the first representative assembly at which important business was transacted. No one could be admitted as a citizen unless he was a member of the church. Many of the first settlers came from Natsing, a small village in England, about 20 miles from London on the River Lee. Morris, Ruggles, Payson, and Peacock, names read in the earliest records of Woodstock, were old family names in Natsing. Other first inhabitants of Roxbury came from Wales, and the west of England, or London and its vicinity. Among the founders were John Johnson, Richard Bugby, and John Levens, whose family names are well known as among the first settlers of Woodstock. All were men of property free. None were of the poorer sort. In 1631, the Reverend John Eliot, a native of the village of Natsing, arrived with a company of nazing pilgrims. Another name, equally prominent in the earliest years of the history of Roxbury, was that of William Pynchon, afterwards known as the founder of Springfield in Massachusetts. Eliot, though earnestly solicited to become pastor of the church in Boston, accepted the charge of the church in Roxbury, which was organized in 1632.5, and was the sixth church, in order of time, established in New England. Only Boston excels Roxbury in the number of its citizens, who have made illustrious the early history of the Massachusetts colony of 6. In fact, Roxbury has been called the mother of towns, no less than 15 communities having been founded by her citizens. Towns within the jurisdiction of Massachusetts had grown to 30, and Roxbury did more than her share towards the organization of the new towns. Among the most important of these settlements was the town of Woodstock, whose bicentennial we this day celebrate. Among the early settlers of Roxbury, who themselves became, or whose descendants became, the early settlers of Woodstock, were the Bartholomews, Bowens, Bugbys, Chandlers, Childs, Corbins, Crafts, Briggses, Garys, Holmeses, Johnsons, Lyons, Levinses, Mays, Morrises, Paysons, Peacocks, Pepys, Perrins, Scarboroughs, and Williamses, 7 in 1643. Pride. Trade. A glance at the country about us, previous to the settlement of the town, in 1686, shows us a land sparsely inhabited by small bands of peaceful Indians, without an independent chief of their own, and who paid tribute to the sachem of the Mohegans, the warriors who had revolted from the Pequots. Mobbequasset, or the mat-producing place, was the name of the principal Indian village, and that name still exists in the corrupted form of Quasset to designate a section of the town. Woodstock was a portion of the Nipmuc country, so called because it contained fresh ponds or lakes, in contrast to other sections that bordered upon the sea or along running rivers. Lie lodged at Indians' towns all the way. 12. Indians from the Nipmucton country took corn to Boston in 1630, soon after the arrival of the Bay Colony, and in 163,311 John Oldman and his 3 Dorchester companions passed through this same section on their way to learn something of the fair Connecticut River country, and they may have rested on yonder plain hill, for history states that the old Connecticut path over which that distinguished Band 13 of colonists went in 1635 and 1636 to settle the towns of Windsor, Wethersfield, and Hartford, passed through the heart of what is now Woodstock 14, Cort 14. But the most noteworthy feature in the description of the Indians of the Nipmuc country is that as early as 1670 they were formed into praying villages. This path, so famous in the early days of New England history, came out of Thompson Woods. A little north of Woodstock Lake, and proceeding across the Senexet Meadow, ran west near Plain Hill, Marcy's Hill, and a little south of the base of Coatney Hill. For more than 50 years before the settlement of the town, this historic path near Woodstock Hill was the outlet for the surplus population of Massachusetts Bay, and the line of communication between Massachusetts and the Connecticut and New Haven colonies. Evidently, the instructions of Dove, Cradock in his letter of March 1629 to John Endicott, had not been forgotten. In the heart of one man at least, that idea was paramount. In that letter he said, "Be not unmindful of the main end of our plantation by endeavoring to bring the Indians to the knowledge of the gospel." John Eliot, the apostle to the Indians, was not content to be simply the pastor of the church of Roxbury for nearly 60 years. Amid his countless other labors, he preached the gospel to the Indians of the Nipmuc country. The first Indian church in America had been established by him at Natick in '51, and in 1674 he visited the Indian villages in the wild territory about these very hills, as he found it, to quote his own words, 15 absolutely necessary to carry on civility with religion. He was accompanied by Major Daniel Gookin, who had been appointed in 1656, magistrate all the Indian towns. Quinnatisset, on what is now Thompson Hill, was the name of another praying town. Marnexit was first visited on the Mohegan, or Quinebaug River, near what is now New Boston, where Eliot preached to the natives, using as his text the 7th verse of the 24th Psalm. "Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and ye lift up, ye lift up. Everlasting doors, and the King of Glory shall come in." But a quotation 16 from the homely narrative of Major Gookin is the best description of Eliot's memorable visit to Woodstock. We went not to it, Quinnatisset being straitened for time, but we spake with some of the principal people at Wabquisset 17. Wabquisset lieth about 9 or 10 miles from Marnexit upon the west side, 6 miles of Mohegan River, and is distant from Boston west and by south about 72 miles. It lieth about 4 miles within the Massachusetts south line. It hath about 30 families and 150 souls. It is situated in a very rich soil, manifested by the goodly crop of Indian corn, then newly ingathered, not less than 40 bushels upon an acre. We came thither late in the evening upon the 15th of September, and took up our quarters at the Sagamore's wigwam, who was not at home, but his squaw courteously admitted us, and provided liberally in their way for the Indians that accompanied us. This Sagamore inclines to religion, and keeps the meeting on Sabbath days at his house, which is spacious, about 60 feet in length and 20 feet in width. The teacher of this place is named Sampson, an active and ingenious person. He speaks good English and reads well. But now he is, through grace, changed and become sober and pious, and he is now very thankful to me for the discipline formerly exercised towards him. And besides his flagitious life heretofore, he lived very uncomfortably with his wife. But now they live very well together. I confess this story is a digression, but because it tendeth to magnify grace, and that to a prodigal, and to declare how God remembers his covenant unto the children of such as are faithful and zealous for him in their time and generation, I have mentioned it. He is brother unto Joseph, before named, teacher at Shabanakogo 19, being both hopeful, pious, and active men, especially the younger, before named Samson, teacher at Wadquisset, who was, a few years since, a dissolute person, and I have been forced to be severe in punishing him for his misdemeanours. Formerly, we being at Wadquisset, at the Sagamore's wigwam, divers of the principal people that were at home came to us, with whom we spent a good part of the night in prayer, singing psalms and exhortation. There was a person among them, who, sitting mute a great space, at last spake to this effect, that he was agent for Uncas, sachem of Mohegan, who challenged right to, and dominion over, this people of Wadquisset, and said he, Uncas is not well pleased that the English should pass over Mohegan River to call his Indians to pray to God. Upon which speech Mr. Eliot first answered that it was his work to call upon all men everywhere, as he had opportunity, especially the Indians, to repent and embrace the gospel, but he did not meddle with civil right or jurisdiction, if they embraced Christianity. Yet it was not hereby intended to abridge the Indian sachems of their just and ancient right over the Indians, in respect of paying tribute, or any other dues. When he had done speaking, then I declared to him, and desired him to inform Uncas what I said, that Wadquisset was within the jurisdiction of Massachusetts, and that the government of that people did belong to them, and that they do own to them, look upon themselves concerned to promote the good of all people within their limits, especially. But the main design of the English was to bring them to the good knowledge of God in Christ Jesus, and to suppress among them those sins of drunkenness, idolatry, powering, or witchcraft, whoredom. As for the English, they had taken no tribute from them, nor taxed them with anything of the kind. Upon the 16th day of September 18, being at Wadquisset, as soon as the people were come together, Mr. Eliot first prayed, and then preached to them in their own language, out of 33. First seek the kingdom of heaven, and the righteousness thereof, and all these things shall be added unto you. Their teacher, Samson, first reading, and setting the seaside order. P.S. First part, which was sung. The exercise was concluded with prayer. Also I exhorted the people to yield obedience to the gospel of Christ, and to those set in order there. Then I began court among the Indians, and first I approved their teacher, Samson, and their constable, Black James, 20, giving each of them a charge to be diligent and faithful in their places. Then published a warrant or order that I had prepared, empowering the constable to suppress drunkenness, Sabbath-breaking, especially powwowing and idolatry. Back to Mount Exit and Shabanakargamon, where we lodged this night. And, after warning given, to apprehend all delinquents and bring them before authority to answer for their misdoings. The smaller faults to bring before Watasakamaban, ruler of the Nipmuc country. For idolatry and powwowing bring them before me. So we took leave of this people of Wadquisit, and about 11 o'clock returned. History fails to locate the spot where John Eliot's sermon to the Indians of Woodstock was delivered, but tradition points to Pulpit Rock, so called, under the aged chestnut trees of the McClellan farm, near the old Hall 21 road. But Eliot's good work in the Nipmuc country was destroyed when King Philip's War broke out in 1675. In August of that year, a company of Providence men journeyed as far as Wabbaquasset, thinking that possibly King Philip himself had escaped thither. 22. They found an Indian fort a mile or two west of Woodstock Hill, but no Indians. A party from Norwich in June of the following year also found deserted Wabbaquasset and the other praying villages. Desolation and devastation followed the disappearance of the red man. Forgotten race, farewell. The Nipmuc country became more a wilderness than ever, forsaken of its aboriginal inhabitants, whose barbaric tenure could not stand against a superior civilization. Your haunts we tread, our mighty rivers speak your words of yore, our mountains wear them on their misty head, our sounding cataracts hurl them to the shore. 23. Thought. But on the lake your flashing oar is still, hushed is your hunter's cry on dale and hill, your arrow stays the eagle's flight no more, and ye, like troubled shadows, sink to rest in unremembered tombs, unpitied and unblessed. The time had now arrived for the white man to make a settlement at Wabbaquasset. Dudley and Stoughton purchased all the claims, and the following year, 24, the whole Nipmuc country became the property of Massachusetts Bay. Jurisdiction over the country had already been claimed under the terms of the Massachusetts Charter. In May of 1681, the General Court of Massachusetts Bay had given to William Stoughton and Joseph Dudley the care of the Nipmuc country, with power to ascertain the titles belonging to the Indians and others, and a meeting of the claimants was held, the following month at Cambridge, at which John Eliot rendered much assistance as interpreter. Many of the inhabitants of the town of Roxbury now felt that they could improve their condition and increase their usefulness by forming a settlement in some desirable portion of the new country. Town meetings to arrange for a new settlement were held in Roxbury in October of 1683.26. Undoubtedly their pastor, John Eliot, had told them of the beauty and fertility of the country about the praying villages of Mount-Exit, Quinatisset, and Wabbaquasset. 25. A petition was signed by a number of representative citizens of the town, asking that the General Court might grant to them a tract 7 miles square about Quinatisset in the Nipmuc country. All save 6 of the 36 who signed this petition afterwards became settlers of the new town, and of the 5 selectmen of Roxbury who presented the petition to the General Court, 327 represented families prominent in the early history of Woodstock. The General Court at once granted 28. The petition, provided the grant should not fall within a section to be reserved for Messrs. Stoughton and Dudley and Major Thompson, and provided also that 30 families should be settled on the plantation within 3 years from the following June, and maintain amongst them an able, orthodox, godly minister. 29. In 1684, Roxbury accepted the terms of the General Court, and sent Samuel and John Ruggles, John Curtis, and Edward Morris, as a committee of 4, to view the wilderness and find a convenient place. A committee was therefore appointed to draw up an agreement for the goers, as they were called, to sign. As Quinatisset had been in part already granted, the committee reported 30, a territory commodious, for settlement at Senexook and Wappagasset, and the lands adjacent. The southern half of the grant was the portion subsequently occupied by the goers. Actual possession, however, was not taken until April of the following year. In 1685-31, in answer to the petition of Edward Morris, deputy in behalf of the town of Roxbury, the General Court extended the limit of the time of settlement from June 10th, 1687 to Jan 31, 1688, and granted freedom from raid. At town meetings held in Roxbury during the same year, it was arranged that one half of the grant should belong to the new settlers, and £100 in money be given to them in instalments of £20 a year, and the other half of £30 helped. Grants should belong to the stayers in consideration of the aid given the goers. On the second page of the cover of the old and musty first volume of records of the proprietors of New Roxbury, afterwards called Woodstock, are these words, April 5, 1686. These 13 planters, or the old 13 as they have always been called, were visited in May or June of 33 by a committee who had been appointed to ascertain the bounds of the grant. The last meeting of the goers to settle was held in Roxbury, July 21st. Their first meeting in New Roxbury was held August 25th. These are the 13 who were sent out to spy out Woodstock as planters and to take actual possession. Jonathan Smithers, John Frissell, Nathaniel Gary, John Marcy, Benjamin Griggs, John Lord, Benjamin Griggs, John Lord, Benjamin Sabin, Henry Bowen, Matthew Davis, Thomas Bacon, Peter Aspinwall, George Griggs, and Ebenezer Morris. Exactly 200 years ago today. Would that the words of that prayer and the picture of that scene could today be reproduced. A committee of 7, consisting of Joseph Griggs, Edward Morris, Henry Bowen, Sr., John Chandler, Sr., Samuel Craft, Samuel Scarborough, and Jonathan Smithers, having been appointed to make needful arrangements preliminary to the drawing of home lots, that drawing took place on the 28th of August, or, by the new style of reckoning time, say the old records, after solemn prayer to God, who is the disposer of all things, they drew lots according to the agreement, every man being satisfied and contented with God's disposing. Surely the spirit of the Puritans of 1630 was the spirit of that band of pilgrims in 1686 on yonder hill. A few returned to Roxbury. These are the honoured names of the first settlers: Thomas and Joseph Bacon, James Corbin, Benjamin Sabin, Henry Bowen, Thomas Lyon, Ebenezer Morris, Matthew Davis, William Lyon, Sr., John Chandler, Sr., Peter Aspinwall, John Frizzell, Joseph Frizzell, Jonathan Smithers, John Butcher, Jonathan Davis, Jonathan Peake, Nathaniel Gary, John Bowen, Nathan, Yale Johnson, John Hubbard, George Griggs, Benjamin Griggs, William Lyon, Jr., John Levens, Nathaniel Sanger, Samuel Scarborough, Samuel Craft, Samuel May, Joseph Bugby, Samuel Peacock, Arthur Humphrey, John Lugby, Andrew Lockydock, Arthur Humphrey, John Edward Morris, Joseph Peake, John Holmes, and John Chandler, Jr. Of that list of 39, 34 Benjamin Sabin, Nathaniel Sanger, Nathaniel Gary, John Hubbard, Matthew Davis, and George Griggs, afterwards moved to Pomfret. Peter Aspinwall and his stepsons, the sons of Levens, went to Killingby, and Arthur Levens went to Killingby. Humphrey and others became the first settlers of Ashford, as a few others. But a large share of the original settlers lived and died in Woodstock, including Edward and Ebenezer Morris, Jonathan and Joseph Peake, James Corbin, Thomas and Joseph Bacon, Henry Bowen, William and Thomas Lyon, John Sheena, Sr. and John Chandler, Jr., John Butcher, Nathaniel Johnson, Joseph and John Bugby, John Holmes, and perhaps, as an illustration of the ages of the pioneers in 1686, it may be mentioned that Benjamin Griggs was 19, Joseph Bacon and Andrew Watkins 20, John Bugby, John Chandler, Jr., James Corbin, and Jonathan Davis 21, Peter Aspinwall 20, Matthew Davis, John Frizzell, and Lute. In Sabine and Samuel Scarborough 40, Joseph Peake 41, Joseph Bugby and Levens 46, Samuel Craft and Jonathan Peake 35-49, Ekin John Chandler, 50 wine. Ebenezer Morris, 22. John Butcher and Nathaniel Gary, 23. John Bowen and John Marcy, 24. George Griggs, John Holmes and Samuel May, 25. Thomas Bacon, 28. Samuel Peacock, 29. William Lyon, Jr. And Nathaniel Sanger, 34. Thomas Leon, 38. Nathaniel Johnson, 39. Benjamin. Henry Bowen, 53. Edward Morris, 56. And William Lyon, Sr., 65 to 36. The first one of the 39 to die was Lute. Edward Morris, whose gravestone bears the date of 1689, the oldest in the county 37, the last one of the 39 to die, was Thomas Bacon, who lived to be 96 years of age. First settler died. That is, an inhabitant of this town remembers one who knew some of the first settlers of Woodstock. Lute, pub. To show the extreme ages of some of the Woodstock people, it may here be said that Paraclete Skinner, now living, remembers Deacon Jedediah Morse, who died in 1819 at the age of 93, and Deacon Morse was 17 years old when Colonel John Chandler, a first settler, was living and 32 years of age the year that Thomas Bacon, another. Henry Bowen, one of the first settlers, attained the age of 90. Deacon Morse's grandmother, who came in April of 1687 to Woodstock with her husband Jonathan Peake, Jr., 38, likewise lived to be 90, lacking 12 days. 280 years. Time alone can tell to what figure their combined ages may attain. One of the oldest persons that ever lived in Woodstock was Sarah, the daughter of Jonathan Peake, Jr., and the mother of Deacon Morse, who reached the age of 99, lacking 44 days, and who had about her while living 319 descendants, 39. But what a small number in that list of first settlers had descendants bearing the same family name among the citizens of Woodstock today. Only James Corbin, William Lyon, John Chandler, Nathaniel Johnson, Benjamin Griggs, Henry Bowen, Joseph Bugby, Nathaniel Sanger, and John Marcy. But Woodstock is proud to own, among the descendants of the first settlers, influential and honoured citizens of many towns and cities, and some of them, I rejoice to say, are here today. The first settlers of Woodstock had the right stuff in them to succeed. After the home lots were chosen, highways were laid out, a grist mill and sawmill built, bridges constructed, new inhabitants brought in, and everything possible was done to make the settlement permanent. A delay ensued until William and Mary became sovereigns of Great Britain. An effort was now made to get a confirmation of the grant occupied by the new settlers, but as long as Sir Edmund Andros was the royal governor of the province, it was impossible. A general meeting of the inhabitants was held July 2nd, 1687, when John Chandler, Senior Nathaniel Johnson, Joseph Bugby, James White, and James Peake were chosen to order the prudential affairs of the place as selectmen for the year ensuing. The new settlers had not yet an organized town government. The settlement, like the first settlements in Windsor and Hertford, received its name from the mother town, 40, but the new Roxbury people wished to have a name of their own and a town of their own. At the beginning of the year 1690, they chose a committee of 3 to petition the General Court to substitute a new name for that of New Roxbury. The New Roxbury Committee pressed their claims, and on March 18, 1690, the General Court confirmed the grant, and voted that the name of the plantation be Woodstock. The committee at once conferred with the mother town, for on Jan 13, 1690, Roxbury held a town meeting at which it was voted to request the General Court to allow the settlement in the Nipmuc country to become a town, to confirm the grant and give a suitable name. We owe the name of Woodstock to Captain Samuel Sewell 41, who was Chief Justice of Massachusetts from 1718 to 1728. He has been called a typical Puritan and the Pepys of New England, the man who judged the witches of Salem and afterwards repented of it. 42. He was no doubt on business of state, being one of the governor's councillors, and one of a committee of 7 of the council, with the same power as the council to arrange for setting forth the forces. In 1690, when Count Frontenac's 43 forces were coming down from Canada upon the settlements of the United Colonies, and Massachusetts determined to ask the help of Connecticut in protecting the upper towns on the Connecticut River, Captain Sewell rode past Woodstock on his way to Connecticut. 44. The proximity of New Roxbury to Oxford in Massachusetts suggested to him, he tells us, the name of a famous place near Old Oxford in England. It stands on a hill. I saw it as I went to Coventry, but left it on the left hand. In his diary of March 18, 168,990, Captain Sewell says, I gave New Roxbury the name of Woodstock because of its nearness to Oxford, for the sake of Queen Elizabeth, and the notable meetings that have been held at the place bearing that name in England, some of which Dr. Gilbert 45 informed me of when in England. Some told Captain Ruggles 46 that I gave the name and put words in his mouth to desire of me a bell for the town. Settlement in New England. 47. Though Judge Sewell, years after his first visit, had social relations 48 with some of the inhabitants of Woodstock, there is no evidence to show that he ever gave a bell to the town or to the church. 49. That he gave us something better, a good name. The name of Woodstock, associated with the memories of Saxon and Norman kings, the spot way. Ray King Alfred translated the Consolations of Philosophy by Boethius, the birthplace of the poet Chaucer, the prison of Queen Elizabeth 50 History and Romance 51, have made illustrious the names of Woodstock and Woodstock Park, and the notable meetings spoken of by Judge Sewell as having taken place in Old England have been transferred to Vaucluse. Surely the name of Woodstock, as applied to the little village of New Roxbury, has proved to be no misnomer. It should be said that the western part of the town, when it became a settlement years after, revived the old name of New Roxbury. The church in West Woodstock belonged to what was called the parish of New Roxbury, or the second precinct of Woodstock, by 52 Sids. The most pressing duty for our ancestors to perform, after securing a name and legalized status for the town, was the settlement of an able, orthodox, godly minister. The Reverend Josiah Dwight, a graduate of Harvard College in the class of 1687, received the appointment and was installed October 17, 1690, receiving 40 the first year, 50 the second, and 60 the third year and thereafter. It was with difficulty, however, that these sums were paid, and when, some years after, the account was settled by the payment of what was due, he gave a receipt in full from the beginning of the world to May 6, 1696. A home lot was allowed Mr. Dwight according to the original drawing of lots, and arrangements were made to build a home for him immediately after his settlement. The following year, 53, it was determined to construct a house of worship, which was completed early 54 in 1694. This was the first meeting house in Windham County, and here gathered, on Sabbath days, the settlers from miles around. The people of Pomfret attended church in this rude structure until 1715, when their own society was organized. All of those men today have descendants in Woodstock or its immediate vicinity. The officers of the new town, elected in 169,055, were John Chandler, Sr., William Bartholomew, Benjamin Sabin, John Levens, and Joseph Bugby as selectmen, and John Chandler, Jr. At that time, the men of Woodstock imposed a fine of 1 6 upon everyone who failed to attend the town meeting, and 6 an hour for tardiness. But Roxbury's interest in the northern half of Woodstock continued till 1797, when the lands had all been sold or become individual property. Disputes regarding titles to land and the boundary line dividing the north half of the town, and disputes with the mother town regarding this northern half, which belonged to Roxbury according to the terms of the grant, were vexatious, and not in every respect creditable to Woodstock. Large tracts, however, were held by Roxbury and Woodstock speculators for many years afterward. Troubles with the Indians, who returned to their old hunting and fishing haunts after the settlement of the town, broke out in 1696, 5, 6, and again in 1704, and even as late as 1724. When a war broke out abroad, there was trouble with the Indians at home. When an Indian outbreak was threatened, the town received some military assistance from the colony government. Such threatened outbreaks retarded the progress of the settlement. Hands of the residents and non-residents of the town be taxed to the extent of 250, to be applied to the building of a church. When the General Court refused the petition, Woodstock asked to be excused from sending her representative to Boston. As the non-residents' lands were almost entirely in the north half of the grant, and belonged to Roxbury people, Roxbury stoutly opposed the tax in a memorial to the General Court. After discussing the question for several years, the town determined, in 1719.57, to erect a new meeting house near the burying ground, instead of at the south end of the village, where the old building stood, yet so straitened were the people in it. Their circumstances that they applied to the General Court in Boston, requesting that the unoccupied L. The town's representative at this time, in fact the first and only representative for many years, was Captain John Chandler, who, like his father Deacon John Chandler, was one of the first settlers. He surveyed lands in Woodstock and neighboring towns, and owned large tracts of territory in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Woodstock became one of the most prominent towns of Worcester County, and John Chandler was made Chief Justice of the Court of Common Pleas and General Sessions, 58-7. To avoid the necessity of sending to Boston to have deeds recorded and wills proven, Captain Chandler tried to get the consent of the General Court in 1720 for the formation of a new county, to be called Worcester County, of which Woodstock should be a part, but a delay ensued until 1731, when Captain, now Colonel, Chandler was successful. Ecclesiastical affairs have been so interwoven with town affairs that it is impossible to give a sketch of Woodstock without giving a history of the churches. It may, however, be done briefly, as others have been appointed to speak specially for the different church organizations of the town. The first settlers had no end of trouble with him, especially regarding money matters, and he was finally removed September 3, 1726. Though the first minister, the Reverend Josiah Dwight, was of the standing order, so-called, and believed in the Cambridge platform, yet he was suspected of theological looseness, and, besides many idiosyncrasies, was accused of speculating in the wild lands of Killingly. Like Mr. Dwight, he was a graduate of Harvard College, and came to Woodstock at the age of 25. The next regular minister was Reverend Amos Throop, who was installed May 24, 1727. Naturally, he found fault when the town attempted to pay him his salary in the depreciated currency of the time. But since the great Creator orders so, here at his feet he doth submissive lie. But the 8 years of his ministry endeared him to the settlement, and his sudden death in 173,559 was keenly felt by his parishioners. The town assumed the expense of his gravestone, upon which may be read these words, "O cruel death, to snatch from us below, one fit to live within the spheres on high." During the pastorate of Mr. Throop, the western part of the town 60 had received some settlers, mostly the sons of Woodstock's first settlers. This request, it was argued, was only fair, inasmuch as the western half was obliged to contribute to the support of the church on the hill. In 173,361, the town arranged to have a schoolhouse built in this part of the town, and, the settlers increasing, West Parish desired 62 to have religious services of its own for 4 months of the year at the expense of the whole town. In 1727, Joshua Chandler took possession of some land that had been given him by his father, Colonel John Chandler, and representatives of the families of Child, Corbin, Lyon, Aspinwall, Bugby, Morris, Marcy, Morse, Payson, Perrin, Johnson, Frizzle, Briggs, and Payne soon followed. But the town refused 63 to assume any of the charges. They still persisted, and petitioned 65 that the western half might be formed into a distinct township. After trying the experiment for 2 winters, the West Parish people found the expense of supporting both ministers to be too great a burden, and they therefore again asked in 64 the help of the town, and were refused. Town meetings were held, and at last permission was given 66 them to address the General Court in Boston on the subject. But their petition to the General Court was dismissed. They were willing to give up all idea of a town of their own. This modified request was now made to the town 67 and to the General Court 68. The West Woodstock people, however, insisted on the formation of a parish where they could worship God in their own fashion, and not be obliged to aid any church outside of their parish. The General Court complied by passing an Act in 1743.69 incorporating the district as the West Parish of Woodstock. A meeting was at once held 70, at which it was determined to survey the line dividing the two portions of the town. West Parish was now called by the old name of New Roxbury. These acts were afterwards approved by the General Assembly of Connecticut, when Woodstock withdrew from under the jurisdiction of Massachusetts, 71. In 1747, Reverend Stephen Williams was ordained pastor. The church 72 on the hill was under the pastorate of Reverend Abel S. Stiles, who had been ordained in 1737.73. Read quite as much as episcopacy or popery, it was the Saybrook platform. But the fact that Mr. Stiles was a graduate of Yale College 74, instead of Harvard, as his two predecessors had been, and his family connection 75, were all with Connecticut, his parishioners were led to believe that he would favour the Saybrook platform of faith rather than the Cambridge platform, and if there was one thing our ancestors abhor, to be tainted with that form of faith, as was the case with Mr. Stiles after his settlement in Woodstock, was heresy indeed, and Woodstock was determined, according to her grant of 1683, to have none other but an able orthodox, godly minister. Councils were held. Instead of attending the Association of Ministers in Massachusetts, Mr. Stiles preferred the meetings of the Windham County Association in Connecticut, and when Woodstock became a part of Connecticut, the troubles with Mr. Stiles increased. Pastor and parishioners tried to discipline each other. The General Assembly of Connecticut was appealed to. Threats, even violence, was resorted to. Stiles, personally as well as theologically. The Stiles party had favoured, while the anti-Stiles party had opposed, the annexation of Woodstock to Connecticut. The result of the quarrel was a break in the church in 1760. But without going into the details of this long, protracted struggle, let it be said that there were two parties in the controversy, one side sympathizing with Mr. Stiles in his more liberal theological views, and the other side at first insisting on a minister who should conform in all respects to the standing order, and afterwards opposed to Mr. The North Society was constituted by Act 76 of the General Assembly, and Mr. Stiles and his followers went to Muddy Brook. Thus was formed the Third Congregational Church of Woodstock, and here Mr. Stiles continued to preach until his death in 1783.7. After the departure of Mr. Stiles, the first church was without a pastor for 3 years. When it was determined in 1831 by the church in East Woodstock to build a new meeting house on the spot of the old one erected in 1767, the people in village corners objected to the location and formed the society of their own Congregational Church of Woodstock. Much time was spent in going after ministers. The young Yale graduates who preached on trial did not please the church, whose sympathies were still with Massachusetts. Finally, the Reverend A.B.L. Leonard, a graduate of Harvard College 78, was installed on June 23, 1763. Of the 12 churches asked to assist in the ordination, only 179 was a Connecticut organization. The church was prosperous under Mr. Leonard. In fact, it was not until the year 1815 that the church, after an adherence to the Cambridge Order of Faith for 125 years, finally accepted the Saybrook platform and joined the Connecticut Association. Largely owing to his influence, the quarrel between the first and third churches was healed, 80. In 1775, on the breaking out of the Revolutionary War, Mr. Leonard was made chaplain of the 3rd Regiment of Connecticut troops. The church, at the request of the commander, Colonel, afterwards General, Israel Putnam, granted the necessary leave of absence of the people of Woodstock, the Liberties or America. The following year, Washington and Putnam joined in writing a letter 81 to the church at Woodstock, asking for a continued leave of absence for Mr. Leonard, praising him in the highest terms, and saying, "He is employed in a glorious work of attending to the morals of a brave people who are fighting for their liberties, the liberties." Agreeable a gentleman as Mr. Leonard was, he was suddenly superseded while on a visit to Woodstock, and on receiving the mortifying news when en route to join the army he at once committed suicide. If ever there was an able, orthodox Dodley minister of the true Massachusetts type, such as old Woodstock always loved to have, he was the Reverend Eliphalet Lyman, who was ordained in 1779. He was the last of the historic ministers of Woodstock. Although a graduate of Yale College, 82, he fulfilled the conditions of the Cambridge platform, and continued pastor of the First Church for 45 years, and was warmly interested in the religious and educational development of the town. He was respected, and he was feared. Height, Altautzis. The boys stopped playing ball when old priest Lyman, in cocked hat and knee breeches, remembered by some of you here today, walked up the common. It should now be related how Woodstock, settled under Massachusetts, became a part of the state of Connecticut. Massachusetts claimed Woodstock because the grant was supposed to lie within her chartered bounds, as surveyed in 1642, and that claim was what Major Daniel Gookin referred to when he rebuked the agent of Uncas in 1674, during his visit with John Eliot at Woodstock. But Massachusetts did not believe that the line of 1642 was wrong when she confirmed the grant to the Roxbury settlers. She even censured Woodstock for daring to ask Connecticut to confirm a portion of the grant that fell south of this line. Though Connecticut justly held she was entitled to Woodstock, according to the terms of her charter, she was, nevertheless, willing to forego her claim to this town, provided Massachusetts would allow her to have the jurisdiction over other territory, claimed by both colonies. But the repeated attempts to settle the controversy failed, and it was not till 1713 that an agreement was finally concluded. For the privilege of having jurisdiction over Woodstock and the other towns claimed by both sides, Massachusetts agreed to compensate Connecticut by giving her unimproved lands in western Massachusetts and New Hampshire. These lands were therefore called equivalent lands, and were sold by Connecticut for $2,274, and the money given to Yale College. Woodstock was entirely satisfied with this agreement, as all her associations were with Massachusetts, so Woodstock applied to Connecticut, claiming that the agreement of 1713 had been made without her consent. But in 1747 the town thought that her taxes, which had been increased owing to the French and Spanish Wars, 83, would be lighter, and her privileges greater if she followed Suffield, Enfield, and Somers in trying to get off to Connecticut. After much deliberation, Connecticut voted in 1749 to receive the town, and declared the agreement of 1713 not binding. Woodstock was delighted at being received into Connecticut, and at a memorable town meeting 84 made Thomas Chandler and Henry Bowen the first members of the General Assembly. In fact, had it not been for the Revolution, Massachusetts might still be claiming Woodstock, 85. Though Woodstock has since 1749 been a part of this state, Massachusetts would never formally yield jurisdiction over the town, and even as late as 1768 warned the inhabitants not to pay taxes to Connecticut. It might be added that Woodstock, in being annexed to Connecticut, lost about 3,000 acres north of the colony line. This strip of land was known as the Middlesex Gore for 45 years, and was annexed to Dudley and Sturbridge in 1794. Woodstock's military glory is something of which she may well be proud. After becoming a part of Connecticut, Woodstock was anxious that the northern half of Windham County should be made into a separate county, of which Woodstock should be the shire town. But as Pomfret also desired the county seat, and as the state seemed unwilling to act, the project fell through 86X. Representatives of Morris, Bowen, Hubbard, and Johnson families, who came to Woodstock in 1686, fought under Captain Isaac Johnson of Roxbury in King Philip's War, and were in the famous Narragansett battle in 1675, when Captain Johnson was lost, killed 87. For the first 40 years after the settlement of the town, the Indian troubles made every man acquainted with the use of firearms, and when in later years there appeared no danger at home, our ancestors were ready to fight abroad, either savage or of foreign foes. In 1724, Colonel John Chandler received orders from Boston to impress 20 Woodstock men for the Frontier Service 88, which meant that they should fight Indians in central Massachusetts. In 1748, before the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle had been signed, 93, the death was chronicled of several Woodstock men who had gone up into New Hampshire to fight 94 the Indians with a company of colony troops. When the news of the war between France and Great Britain was received in Boston in 1744, 90 men from Colonel Thomas Chandler's 91 regiment guarded the frontier, and history declares that this regiment, commanded by a Woodstock man, rendered efficient service in the capture of Louisburg in 1745.92. Woodstock and Pomfret boys composed the company of Captain Israel Putnam in this war. In the French and Indian War 95, for the conquest of Canada, the families of Bacon, Bugby, Child, Corbin, Chandler, Frizzle, Briggs, Holmes, Lyon, Marcy, McClellan, Manning, Peake, and Perrin had representatives who distinguished themselves in the service. The service rendered by Woodstock during the Revolution was most valuable. The McClellan and Lyon of the 7 Years' War were the McClellan and Lyon of the Revolution, and were of the same family as the McClellan and Lyon, so celebrated and so much beloved in our own Civil War. The town voted to purchase as few British goods as possible, and sent 65 fat sheep to Boston as a contribution to alleviate what the town records call the distressed and suffering circumstances of that city. Captain Elisha Child, Charles Church Chandler, Jedediah Morse, Captain Samuel McClellan, and Nathaniel Child were appointed at Committee 96 for maintaining a correspondence with the towns of this and the neighbouring colonies. The spirit of revolution, which had been growing, rose to fever heat when the powder stored in Cambridge by the Patriots was removed, in September of 1774, to Boston. The news flew as fast through the New England towns as horses' hoofs could take it. The young men of Woodstock did not wait for the call to arms. A son of Esquire Wolcott brought the news to Curtis's Tavern in Dudley, and a son of Captain Clark carried it to his father's house in Woodstock, where it was carried to Colonel Israel Putnam in Pomfret, 97. At the very beginning of the Revolution, Woodstock was eager to do its duty. They hurried to Cambridge, and, with the inhabitants of that and other towns, were with difficulty restrained from marching into Boston to demand, with their loaded muskets, the return of the powder. Ambridge, while Captain Samuel McClellan had charge of the troop of horse, of which John Flynn was trumpeter, Captain Nathaniel Marcy, Captains Elisha and Benjamin Child, lute. When the cry went through New England that blood had been shed at that birthplace of American liberty, the historic Lexington, 189 men from Woodstock, answered that call, 98 Ephraim, Manning, Stephen Lyon, or Asa Morris, and William Frizzle were officers in Colonel Israel Putnam's regiment, when that regiment was stationed at Seashant at sea. Josiah Child, Captain Daniel Lyon, Jabez and John Fox, Samuel Perry, and many other Woodstock men rendered services in this war equally efficient. "I don't know whether I killed any," was his reply, "but I took good aim, fired, and saw them drop." When Samuel Perry, in his old age, used to go up to the store on Woodstock Hill in the evening, the boys would ask him to tell them about the Battle of Bunker Hill, and would always ask if he had killed any of the British in that battle. Our worn saviours of the bleeding land. 99. Another Woodstock name, always honoured at home, as another of the same family name is today no less honoured abroad, was Dr. David Holmes. He had served as surgeon in the French War, and lived to see the thieves, bloodier strife that made our nation free, to serve with willing toil, with skilful hand, the war. When Washington assumed charge of the troops in Cambridge, the Reverend A.B.L. Leonard, the beloved pastor of the First Church at Woodstock, preached most acceptably. Washington heard him, and became his warm friend. Woodstock's importance during the Revolution was considerable. During the entire war, Woodstock did more than her share. One line of stages between Woodstock and New London, and another line between Woodstock and New Haven and Hartford, were established, which carried the war news weekly to be distributed through the colony, and thence taken to New York. While there were many from this town who served the patriot cause with glory to themselves and honour to Woodstock, the name of Captain, afterwards General, Samuel McClellan stands out the most illustrious. When the currency of the Continentals had depreciated, and no funds were forthcoming with which to pay the soldiers, general, or more exactly colonel, McClellan advanced 1,000 from his own private purse to pay the men of his regiment. In the War of 1812, Woodstock was also ready to do its duty. But a memorial of the Revolution in which Woodstock may well take the greatest pride is found in the historic elm trees in South Woodstock, planted by the wife of General McClellan on receiving the news of the Battle of Lexington. All honor to the men of Woodstock who fought for and gained their liberties in the Revolution, and all honor to their wives who were equally patriotic at home. The patriotic spirit always characteristic of Woodstock was conspicuous in the War of 1812. Our Ned, to his home at sunrise, he found the common covered with soldiers, ready to go to New London immediately. Woodstock was no less patriotic during the rebellion. When Major William Flynn, of Woodstock Hill, received the news, one evening just after dark, that several British men-of-war were hovering about New London, and that it was in danger of attack, he rode horseback about the country during the night, see officers and men, and warn them to assemble on the common at noon the next day. But when President Lincoln called for volunteers to maintain the unity of the country, this town did her full share in that struggle. Though not a native of Woodstock, General Lyon was descended from an honored family which has been conspicuous in the history of this town from the day of its settlement. Many of you remember attending the funeral of General Nathaniel Lyon, who was killed at the beginning of the war and was buried with military honors in our neighboring town of Eastford. But a name even more illustrious is that of General George B. McClellan, whose grandfather was a native of Woodstock, and whose great-grandfather was General Samuel McClellan, and who himself, as a boy, visited the town. You saw him beneath these very trees 2 years ago. You heard him speak at that time words of love for Woodstock, and words of welcome to distinguished strangers. His voice is no longer heard, but the name of General McClellan will be remembered as long as the name of Woodstock itself shall last. Blessed then be the memory of General George B. McClellan. Woodstock will ever cherish his services and the services of all its sons, who fought for their country in the terrible struggle between the North and the South. As soon as the settlement became an organized town, John Chandler, Jr., was appointed to instruct the children to write and cipher. As the town grew in population, it was divided into school districts. The graves in the different burying grounds of the town, that you annually decorate with flowers, tell more eloquently than words what Woodstock did during the Civil War. Ex-Woodstock has never been negligent in the cause of education. In 1739 was established the United English Library for the propagation of Christianity and useful knowledge. The institution has been deep and far-reaching. Colonel John Chandler was the moderator at the first meeting, and the Reverend Abel Stiles, John May, Benjamin Child, and Pennell Bowen of Woodstock, and leading citizens of Pomfret, and Killingly assisted in the organization. But who can measure the good done by Woodstock Academy, or by the different churches and other organizations of the town? It was General Samuel McClellan and his sons, John and James McClellan, the Reverend Eliphalet Lyman, William Bowen, Parker Cummings, Nehemiah Child, Ebenezer Smith, William Potter, Hezekiah Bugby, Benjamin Leon, Ebenezer Skinner, and Amos Payne, who established Woodstock Academy at the beginning of the present century, and the influence of that honored inn. Such institutions are our heritage, and our duty and privilege it is to improve their character and transmit them to future generations, with the memories and traditions of the town itself. Citizens of Woodstock, listen while I call the roll of some of the distinguished men who have lived or were born in the town. Of the first settlers was Colonel John Chandler, probably the most distinguished citizen that Woodstock had during its first century, the man who made Woodstock known and respected throughout New England. His descendants include the Reverend Thomas Bradbury Chandler, D.D. Winthrop Chandler, the artist, the Honorable, John Church Chandler, Judge John Winthrop Chandler, and others who have been prominent in Woodstock and throughout the country. No one of the first settlers was more distinguished than Edward Morris, who died 3 years after the town was settled. His family was prominent in the history of Old Roxbury, and all through the last century in Woodstock. J. F. Morris, of Hartford, whom I am sure we are glad to welcome as our presiding officer today. John Marcy, a first settler, was the ancestor of Honorable Commodore Charles Morris, a nativial one of Woodstock and well known in the War of 1812, and his son, Commodore George N. Morris, commander in the Civil War of the United States sloop of war Cumberland in Hampton Roads, belonged to the same family as the Honorable William Leonard Marcy, Governor of the State of New York, Secretary of War under President Polk, and Secretary of State under President Pierce. The name of Morse has always been identified with Woodstock. Abiel Holmes's son, Oliver Wendell Holmes, though not born in Woodstock, will be remembered, I am sure, for the beautiful tribute he paid his ancestors in the poem he read in this very park in 1877. Abiel Holmes, 102 D.D., L.D., author of Annals of America, and his father, Dr. David Holmes, a surgeon in the French and Revolutionary Wars, were born in Woodstock and were descended from John Holmes, a first settler. Deacon Jedediah Morse held about all the offices in town that he could lawfully hold, and was deacon of the First Church for 43 years. His grandson was Professor Samuel F. B. Morse, who was more widely known as the inventor of the electric telegraph. His son, the Reverend Jedediah Morse, D.D., a graduate of Yale College and the father of American geography, was also born in Woodstock. Another Woodstock boy was General William Eaton 103, who ran away from home at the age of 16 to enter the Revolutionary War, and was distinguished during the first years of the century as the protector of American commerce in the Mediterranean. Amasa Walker, too, was born in Woodstock, the father of political economy in this country, or better still, the father of General Francis A. Walker, the respected president of the School of Technology in Boston. Governors, members of Congress, men distinguished in law, theology, and medicine, in trade and on the farm, have been born in Woodstock. Another honored name in Woodstock is that of Williams, including Samuel Williams, Sr., the Commissioner of Roxbury in the settlement of New Roxbury, the Reverend Stephen Williams, the first pastor of the church at West Parish, and Jerry W. Williams, the Governor of Vermont and a native of this town. Praise be, therefore, to the women of Woodstock. The roll of honor could be multiplied, but in speaking of the distinguished men, it would be impossible to forget the lessons taught, the struggles endured, and the sacrifices made by the mothers of Woodstock, who all through these 2 centuries have inspired their sons with feelings that have made them industrious, honored, and religious. What has the town done to make us proud of it? This town has the right to be proud of such noble sons and daughters, and we have the right to be proud that such a town as old Woodstock has nourished us and blessed us with such memories and influences. It has exerted an influence for good upon the country wherever its inhabitants have settled. Such settlements have been many. As the surplus population increased, migrations were made to the wild regions of Vermont and New Hampshire. During the early history of the plantation, Woodstock men assisted largely in the settlement of Ashford, Pomfret, Killingly, and other neighboring towns. Later came the settlements made by Connecticut, in the provinces of New York and Pennsylvania, in which Woodstock families were almost without exception represented. At the close of the Revolution, the wave of emigration extended still farther west, and some of the oldest families in Ohio trace their ancestry back to this very town. The ideas inherited from Puritan ancestors and modified according to existing circumstances have made towns, cities, even states, in which the whole country today takes the warmest pride. Today, Woodstock has its representatives in almost every state in the Union, and the material growth and prosperity of the country has been in full measure owing to the settlements made by men from towns in New England like Woodstock. The man who inherits New England traditions from towns like Woodstock is worth more to the country than an army of anarchists and socialists. Woodstock is distinguished, too, for its notable meetings inherited from the Woodstock in England, of which Judge Sewall speaks. The first notable meeting was when John Eliot preached to the Indians on Plain Hill. The second notable meeting was when the first settlers drew their home lots in Wabbaquasset Hall. The third notable meeting was at the funeral of Colonel John Chandler in 1743, attended by the leading men in the colonies of Massachusetts and Connecticut. The church meetings of the last century, the town meeting when Woodstock transferred its allegiance to Connecticut, meetings during the Revolution, the old training days on Woodstock Common, have been followed by no end of notable meetings during the present century. But the chief glory of the town of Woodstock has been its love of local law. But the one notable meeting that those of us present here today have in mind was when Ulysses S. Grant, General of the Army, Saviour of the country and President of the United States, visited the town in 1870. The source of the power of the continental nations of Europe may be traced back through the centuries to the village communities and Teutonic townships. Woodstock has been like a miniature republic, and has always believed in the supremacy of local law. What it conscientiously believed, the town has never been slow to proclaim. In the mark, tithing, and parish of England the same principle of local self-government may be seen. And so our own nation's greatness, through Anglo-Saxon inheritance, has its source, not in a state, city or county, but in a little school, the districts, villages, and towns of New England. Its refusal to send its representative to the General Court at Boston, unless it could tax its own property as it pleased, and the refusal, for political reasons, of its delegates at the State Convention in 1788 to vote for the ratification of the 78 Constitution of the United States are instances of the extreme independence of Woodstock. Tenacious as Woodstock has always been of its privileges and its rights, its loyalty to the country, from the day the 13 colonies became a nation, has never been questioned. What Woodstock's history shall be remains for you, men and women of Woodstock, to develop. I have given scarce more than a sketch in outline of what the history of Woodstock has been during the 200 years since that historic band of brave boys and sturdy men, of deft-handed girls and sober matrons, swarmed like bees from the Roxbury, swore at 504, and settled on the Wabbaquasset Hills. The sons of this generation can be trusted to preserve and transmit them to their descendants. You, men of Woodstock, have your duties in the family, on the farm, toward your schools, and to your churches. The fathers have kept bright the honest traditions and stout independence, the industrious thrift and religious faith which their Puritan fathers brought to the new settlement. All that the fathers have done puts an added obligation upon you. The improvement and development of the town depend on the individual exertions of its citizens. If you are old, remember these institutions in a substantial way. If you are young, infuse some of your own enthusiasm and intelligence into its different organizations. Woodstock will be what you make it. Michelangelo saw in the block the exquisite unsculptured statue. Many blows of the chisel were necessary to disclose the perfect ideal to the eyes of a wondering world. It is said that old John Eliot, from the high pulpit in Roxbury, used to pray every Sabbath for the new settlers at Woodstock. In thought, in plan, in ideal, this town has been almost a perfect organization, but only those whose high vision is willing to pierce through all encrusting imperfections shall be the artists whose toil and sacrifices shall make this dear, noble, historic town of Woodstock an honor to the state and a blessing to its citizens. God, our fathers' God, bless old Woodstock. Footnote is, the words of those prayers are not preserved, but may the spirit of them come down through the centuries to inspire the hearts of all who inherit the blood of the early settlers of this ancient town. One also spelt Roxbury, Roxborough, Roxborough. 2 July 30th, 1630. 3 Young's Chronicles of Massachusetts, p. 396. 4 Winthrop's Journal, by Savage, Vol. A, p. 111. 5 Ordained over the first church Nov, 5, 1632. Eliot's Tomb in Roxbury. 6 Memorial History of Boston, Vol. A, p. 403. 8 Drake's Town of Roxbury and Memorial History of Boston, Vol. E, ppe. 7 Though the Williamses did not settle permanently in Woodstock till some years after the first settlement, the family was most prominent in Roxbury, and one of its representatives visited the ground officially in 1686. 401, 422. 9 De Forest's Indians of Connecticut, and Palfrey's History of New England, and Miss Ellen D. Larned's History of Windham County. Humble's History of Connecticut, Vol. E, 31. 11 September. 10, also called the Wabbaquasset and Whetstone Country, and sometimes the Mohegan Conquered Country, as Uncas had conquered, and added it to his sachendom. 12 Winthrop's Journal, by Savage, Vol. I, 132. Palfrey's Hist of New England, Vol. I, 369. The same year of 1633, Samuel Hall and 2 other persons travelled westward into the country as far as this Connecticut River. Holmes' Annals, Vol. I, 220. 13 Winthrop's Journal, Vol. I, 171. 14, possibly some of the Dorchester emigrants, including Henry Walcott, William Phelps, and others, may have passed a little south of this line. Dr. McClure's Ness, in the possession of the Connecticut Historical Society, in a conversation with the late-aged and respectable Captain Sabin of Pomfret, C.T., he related to me the following discovery, viz. About 40 years ago, he felled a large and ancient yoke about the north line of Pomfret, adjoining Woodstock. On cutting within some inches of the heart of the tree, it was seen to have been cut and chipped with some short tool like an axe. To that time, rightly judging that at the time when it must have been done, the Indians so far inland were destitute and ignorant of the use of iron tools, he counted the number of the annual circular rings from the said marks to the bark of the tree, and found sound that there were as many rings as the years which had intervened from the migration of the Dorchester Power. Styles' History of Ancient Windsor, p. 26, hence the probability that they had journeyed along the north border of Pomfret, and as they travelled by a compass, the conjecture is corroborated by that course being nearly in a direct line from Boston to the place of their settlement, on the place of their settlement. Connecticut River, 15 Memorial Hist. Of Boston, Vol. E, 263. 16 Historical Collections of the Indians in New England. See Collections Mass, Hist. By Daniel Gookin, gentleman, printed from the original manuscript, 1792, dotted, Silk, Vol. I, First Series, PPA, 100 and 9100 and 92. 17 Wabbaquasset, or Woodstock, 18 Dudley. 19 1674. 20 Black James was a distinguished Indian. He met Eliot again in Cambridge in June of 1681, where a meeting of the claimants of the Nipmuc country was held. The village and much of the land of the town of Dudley was known years after the settlement of Woodstock as the land of Black James and Company. Amidon's Historical Collections, Volume 46, 461. 21, named after Wabbaquasset Hall, built in the spring or summer of 1686. Preferred, 159. 22 Palfrey's History of New England, Volume 23, Mrs. L. H. Sigourney's Pocahontas. 24 Feb. 10, 1682. This certainly is a sure indication of the steady adherence of his John Eliot's fellow townsmen, and their belief in the actual benefits of his missionary labours. 26 Octt. 6, 10, and 17. 25 Ellis's History of Roxbury Town. When the people of Roxbury came to take up lands, they selected their locations amongst the praying Indians, or where Indians had been converted to Christianity. 27 Joseph Griggs, John Ruggles, and Edward Morris, v. 42026. 28 DK 5, 1683. 29 records of the Governor and Company of Massachusetts Bay in New England, Volt out. 30 Oct. 27, 1684. 31 Jan 28, v. 468. 32 records of the Governor and Company of the Massachusetts Bay in New England, Volt Doughty. 33 committee appointed May 14, 1686, and reported to Roxbury June 12. The family of Ruggles is prominent among the first settlers in Pomfret. 34. Though the name of John Ruggles was on the list of goers, and a house lot was drawn for him, he did not settle in Woodstock. 35. This Jonathan Peake was the father of Jonathan Peake, Jr., born in 1663, who came to Woodstock in April of 1687. 36 lot 43 was given to Clement Corbin soon after the drawing of home lots. The inscription of his ruled gravestone reads, "Here lies, buried the body of Clement Corbin, aged 70, deceased August 1st, 1696. Edward Morris, deceased September 14th, 1689. 37. The inscription on this small gravestone in a burying ground on Woodstock Hill is read with difficulty, and is as follows: Here lies buried body of Lew. Many of the first settlers now have no stones to mark their graves, and perhaps never had. 38, at that time 24 years old. 39s of Deacon, Jedediah Morse, in the possession of Henry T. Child, of Woodstock. 40 Windsor was first called Dorchester, and Hertford was first called Newtown. 41, born in England, son of Henry Sewell of Rowley, Mass, and grandson of Henry Sewell, Mayor of Coventry, England. In 1684 he became an assistant. 42 Memorial History of Boston, Vol I, 210, 540. 43 Hildreth's History of the United States, Vol Briot, 130. Trumbull's History of Connecticut, Vol D, IA, 402. Palfrey's Hist of New England, Vol. 46. Holmes' Annals of America, Vol I, 430, 431. Bancroft's Hist of the U.S., Vol. 44 collections of the Mass Hist, 3, 183. Soak, Vol. V, 5th Series, P315, footnote, 4th, 48, footnote, and appendix. Palfrey's Hist of N.E., Vol. A. The other 6 members of the committee were Simon Bradstreet, Governor; Sir William Phipps, Governor, 1692, 90 General, or Wade Winthrop, Major Elisha Hutchinson, Colonel Samuel Shrimpton, and Major John Richards. 45 Thomas Gilbert, D.D., of Oxford University, author of Carmen Congratulatorum. Judge Sewell visited him in England, and was shown by Dr. Gilbert the Bodleian Library, a very magnificent thing. See Sewell Papers, 5th Series, Mass, Hist, Suck.U, Collection, Vols, V, Zeiss, therein. We may be allowed to suppose that Dr. Gilbert took Judge Sewell to Woodstock, only 8 miles from Oxford University, where the latter perhaps was impressed for the first time with the name and historical associations of Woodstock. 47 Proceedings of Mass Hist, Soc.E. 46 Captain Ruggles of Roxbury, who died Aug. 15, 1692, of whom Sewell says in his diary Aug. 16th, Captain Ruggles, also buried this day, died last night, but could not be kept. For Feb. 1873, P399. 48, Reverend Mr. Dwight, of Woodstock, dined with him Aug. 24, 1718, and made a prayer at his court Nov. 7, 1718. John Quittimaug, of Woodstock, an Indian, who lived to be 114 years old, was entertained by Judge Sewell in 1723. Also see Diary, Jan. to 1724, paid Mr. Josiah Dwight of Woodstock in full of his demands for boarding Madam Usher there about 6 or 7 weeks in the year 1718 to 11. Boston Newsletter, Aug. 29, 1723. The wills of Woodstock people were proved before the Honourable Samuel Sewell, Judge of Probate. Nis of Martin Payne, of South Woodstock. 49 Paraclete Skinner, of Woodstock, who remembers the second beating house that was taken down in 1821, says that that structure never had a bell. 50 while in custody at Woodstock, Queen Elizabeth, according to the chronicler, Raphael Hollinshed, wrote with a diamond on a pane of glass in her room these words, "Much suspected, of me nothing proved can be," quoth Elizabeth, prisoner. 51. Sir Walter Scott's novel of Woodstock. 52. The last time that the name of New Roxbury, as applied to the name of the whole town, appears in the proprietor's records of Woodstock is March 18, 1689. The first time the name of Woodstock appears is May 26, 1690. Woodstock Records, 53, 1691. 54 March, 55 Town Meeting, November 27th and 28th. 56 Woodstock, at this time, was under the restrictions of frontier towns. It was called a frontier town in 1695. Mass. Hist. Society Proceedings, 1871 to 1873, P395. 57 December 28th. 58 Lincoln's History of Worcester County. 59 Sept. 7th. 61 May 16th. 60 manuscript records of 2nd Precinct of Woodstock, or parish of New Roxbury, in the possession of G. Clinton Williams of West Woodstock. 62 Petition to Town, Nov. 2, 1736. 63 July, 1737. 64 1739. 65. Oxy T 2, 1741. 66 April, 1742. 67 Letter of Orgy, 1742, to Selectmen. 68 Novo 18, 1742. 69 Sept 14th. 70 in the schoolhouse Sept 27th. 71 Line, dividing east and west parishes, approved by General Assembly of Connecticut in 1753, and name of New Roxbury, approved in 1754. 72 the old First Church. 73 July 27th. See records of First and Third Congregational Churches, and Miss Larned's History of Windham County. 74 Class of 1733. 76 Oxley, 1761. President Stiles often visited Woodstock after his uncle had settled at Muddy Brook, now called East Woodstock. 75 He was the son of John Stiles, who belonged to one of the oldest families of Windsor, and was the brother of Reverend Isaac Stiles, a graduate of Yale College in the class of 1722, and was uncle of Ezra Stiles, president of Yale College. 77 July 25th, at the age of 74. 79 Killingly. 78 class of 1759. 80 vote of First Church passed Deck. 8 1766. 81 letter dated Cambridge, March 24th, 1776. ... 82 class of 1776. Doll. 83 Hutchinson's History of Massachusetts, Volvo. 3rd 68 Volvo. 363 396. 84 July 28, 1749. 86 General Putnam was much interested in this project. 85 Woodstock speaks of Massachusetts' repeated claims in a memorial to Conn. General Assembly, May 2, 1771. A meeting to promote the idea was held at his house in Pomfret, Feb. 11 1771. The state again refused the application for a new county, when Pomfret applied in 1786 for a new county, with Pomfret for Shiretown. 88 The Chandler Family, by Dr. George Chandler. 87 Captain Johnson was the father of Nathaniel Johnson, and father-in-law of Lieutenant Henry Bowen, both first settlers of Woodstock. 89 England declared war against France, March the 31st. 91 Lute. Colonel 9,700 men from Massachusetts, of which Woodstock was then a part, were impressed for this service. Thomas Chandler was the son of Colonel John Chandler, and was Woodstock's first representative to the General Assembly of Connecticut. Ante P. 44. 92. The forces were furnished by New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and amounted to 4,070. 93 October 7th. 94 Fight Charlestown, Nov. 4, New Hampshire, May 2, 1748, in which Peter Perrin and Aaron Lyon of Woodstock were killed. 95 or the 7 Years' War, 1753 to 1760. 96 at Town Meeting, June 21st, 1774. 97 Miss Ellen D. Larned's History of Windham County. 98 There is no evidence to prove the reiterated statement that 189 Woodstock men fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill. This number was stationed at Cambridge, and some of them may have been at Bunker Hill. 99 Oliver Wendell Holmes at Roseland Park, July 4th, 1877. 100 Reverend Abel Stiles subscribed the largest sum, 30. He was fond of Bell's letters, and in a communication to his church speaks of his beloved studies. Under his inspiration and instruction, Woodstock and Pomfret young men entered Yale College. 101 1784 to 1856. 102 1763 1837. 103 1764 to 1804. Index. Bell. 104 Cotton Mather. Massachusetts soon became like a hive overstocked with bees, and many thought of swarming into new plantations. Honorable. Academy. Establishment of 53 annexation to Connecticut in 1749, 44 Bacon, Thomas, 26 Black, James, 17 Bowen, Lute, Henry, 26 Chandler, Captain John, 34, Charles Church, 48, Colonel John, 55, Colonel Thomas, 47, John Church, 55, Judge John Winthrop, 55, Reverend Doss, Josiah, 49, Bradbury, D.D., 55, Winthrop, 55 Characteristics of the Place and People, 58 Child, Captain Benjamin, 49, Captain Elisha, 48, 48, 49, Lute, Distinguished Men of Woodstock, 55 Dudley, Joseph, 20, N Meeting, 33 Fox, Jabez, 49. Nathaniel, 48 Church, first built 1694, 32, Fourth Congregational, established 1767, 40. Third Congregational, established 1760, 40 churches. History of 36 Connecticut, first members to General Assembly of 44 Connecticut Park, 13 Court, establishment of, among Indians, 17 Cradock, Governor, 14 Curtis, John, 21 Thomas, letter of, to Countess of Lincoln, March 12, 1631, 8 Dwight, Reverend Josiah, First Minister, installed October 17, 1690, 32 Eton, 56 Education, progress of 53 Eliot's visit to Woodstock, narrative of, by Lookin, families represented in French and Indian War, 47 fines imposed for non-attendance at tow. John, 49 French and Indian War. Woodstock families represented in 47 Frizzle. William, 49 Frontier Service, 20 men impressed for 1724, 46 General Court. Furnace General Court, first in America, Boston. September 28, 1630, Einlookin, Magistrate, 1638, 16 of all Indian towns, 1656, 14 Grant, General U.S., visit of to Woodstock, 59 Gravestow. Old Priest, 42 Lyon, Captain Daniel, 49. Ne'er of Edward Morris, oldest in county, 1689, 25 Holmes, Albiel, 56, Dr. David, 56, Oliver Wendell, 56 home lots, drawing lots for 23 Indian Church, first in America, established by Eliot at Natick in 1651, 14 Indians, 14 Indians. Religious instruction of, in 1629, 14. Troubles with 33 King Philip's War, consequences of, 18 Leonard, Reverend Abiel, installed pastor, 1763, 40. Appointed chaplain of 3rd Regiment of Connecticut, 41. Death of, 41 longevity of some of the present inhabitants, some of 26 lots drawn for home lots, 23 Lyman, Reverend Eliphalet, ordained in 1779, 42. Stephen, 49 McClellan, Captain Samuel, 48, 49, General J.O. B, 51 Manning, Ephraim, 49 Marcy, Captain Nathaniel, 49, Honourable W.M. Commodore Charles, 55, Honourable George N., 55, Edward, 21, Leonard, 56, John, 56 Massachusetts Bay, first organized settlement on 8 Middlesex Gore, 45 military renown of men of Woodstock, 46 minister, appointment of first, 32 Morris, Asa, 49, Samuel F. B., 56, J. F., 56 Morse, Jedediah, 48, 56, Reverend Jedediah, D.D., 56, Y. Deputies sent to Boston Assembly, 1634, 9. Early settlers' names. Sarah, 26, Nipmuc Country, derivation of name, 12. Description of 12, desertion of, after King Philip's War, 18, purchase of, from Indians, 20 notable meeting, 59 Oldman, John, 12 Old 13, names of 23 Perry, Samuel, 49 praying villages, 14 Pulpit Rock, 18 Putnam, Captain Israel, 47 Pinchon, William, 10 Quinatis, 15 Rebellion, services of Woodstock, men in, 51 refusal to send representatives to General Court at Boston, 60 religious services among Indians, the description of 15 Revolution, company of 100 and Revolution, 89 men formed for service in 48, service rendered by town during the 47 Roxburgh. 10. Eliot, Reverend John, pastor of First Church, established in 1632. 10. Woodstock men, 58. Petition for land for 1683. 21. Time granted for 21. Extended 22 settlers, ages of first 25. Descendants of now in town. First settlers were from 9. Founders' names 10. Prominent in organizing settlement of Woodstock 11. Settlement of September 28, 1630. 9 Ruggles. John 21. 21. Samuel 21. Sampson, Indian teacher at Wadquisset. 15 schoolhouse built 1733. 37 selectmen. Names of first 33. Names of first chosen by New Roxbury. 27 settlement arrangements for 21. Committee appointed to find place suitable for 21. Name of changed from New Roxbury to Woodstock. 28 of other towns by the 26. Enterprise of 27. First death among 25. Names of first 24. Original 13. 23 Sewell. Captain Samuel 29. End of the project Gutenberg ebook Woodstock. An historical sketch updated editions will replace the previous. 1. The old editions will be renamed. Extract from Diary of 30 Skinner, Paraclete, 26 stages. Lines of established between Woodstock and New London and New Haven. 50 styles, Reverend Abel S. 39, Stoughton, W.M. 20 Throop, Reverend Amos, 36 trees, planted by wife of General McClellan, 50 Wabbaquasset, 12 Vabquisset, 16 Walker, Amasa, 57, General Francis A. 57 War of 1812, Woodstock Men Inn, 51 West Parish of Woodstock, incorporated 1743, 38, called New Roxbury, 38 Williams, Jared W. 57, Reverend Stephen J. 57, Samuel, Seer, Seer, Stephen, Samuel, Seer, 57 Women of Woodstock, 57 Woodstock Hill, 13 Worcester County formed, 1731, 35 transcriber's note. Unusual spelling is as in the original. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation and you can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules set forth in the general terms of use part of this license apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark and may not be used if you charge for an e-book except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this e-book, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this e-book for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg e-books may be modified and printed, and given away may do practically anything in the United States, with e-books not protected by U.S. copyright law. Start. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. E-terms of the full project Gutenberg license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org. Section 1. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in your possession. Full license, the full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works by using or distributing this work or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all faith. General terms of use and redistributing Project Gutenberg electronic works. 1a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to, and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property trademark copyright agreement. 1b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a project Gutenberg electronic work, and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid set forth in Paragraph 188. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg electronic works, even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See Paragraph 1, C below. See Paragraph 1E below. 1C. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg electronic works, if you follow the terms of this agreement, and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg electronic works. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation, or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg name or associated with the work. 1D. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying, or creating derivative works based on fee, work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg license when you share it without charge with others. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing, or creating derivative works based on this work or any other project. Gutenberg work. 1E1. 1E. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. D. Or distributed. This e-book is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this e-book. 1E. The following sentence, with active links to or other immediate access to the full Project Gutenberg license, must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copy. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this e-book, or online at www.gutenberg.org. 1E3. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1D1 through 1A7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1E1 through 1E7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1E8 or 1E9. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1E4, 1E5. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full project Gutenberg license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work, or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg. 1E6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1. E1 with active links, or immediate access to the full terms of affairs. I1 active links or immediate access to the full term the project Gutenberg license, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. 1E7. Any alternate format must include the full project Gutenberg license as specified in paragraph 1E1. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a project Gutenberg work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version, posted on the official project Gutenberg website www.gutenberg or at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy. Do not charge a fee for access to viewing, displaying, performing, copying, or distributing any Project Gutenberg works unless you comply with paragraph 1E8 or E9. 1E8. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of, or providing access to, or distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works, provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20 of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg works, calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required, to prepare your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing or by email within 30 days of receipt that she does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium, and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1F3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. 1E9. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg works. 1F1F1. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg collection, codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment, damages, costs, and expenses, including legal fees. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg electronic works and the medium on which they may be stored may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate, or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus or computer. 1F2. Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages, except for the right of replacement or refund, described in paragraph 1F3, The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty, or breach of contract, except those provided in paragraph 1F3. 1F3. Limited right of replacement or refund. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive, or incidental damages, even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any you paid for it, by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you receive the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you receive the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. 1F4. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1F5. Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties, or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. Except for the limited right of replacement or refunds set forth in paragraph 1F3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1F6. Section 2. Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion, and distribution of Project Gutenberg electronic works, harmless fraud. M. All liability, costs, and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg work, B. Alteration or any Project Guten or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg work, and C. Any defect you cause. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged, and volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.org, section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 500(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's IN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64,6,221,541. Contributions to the project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Ute 84116, 801-596, 1887. Array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org. Contact Section 4. Information about donations to the project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation project. Gutenberg depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form, accessible by the widest R. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform, and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org. Donate, Section 5. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. General information about Project Gutenberg Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg e-books with only a loose network of volunteer support. Thus, we do not necessarily keep e-books in compliance with any particular paper edition. Project Gutenberg e-books are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new e-books, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new year of now startet. E-books